Terry will now bring us our reading from today, and it's just the one reading from Mark, which is from the earliest Gospel.
And it's Mark 16, verses 1 to 8. When the Sabbath was over, Mary Magdalene and Mary the mother of James and Salome bought spices so that they might go and anoint him. And very early on the first day of the week, when the sun had risen, they went to the tomb. They had been saying to one another, "Who will roll away the stone for us at the entrance of the tomb?" When they looked up, they saw that the stone, which was very large, had already been rolled back. As they entered the tomb, they saw a young man dressed in a white robe sitting on the right side, and they were alarmed. But he said to them, "Do not be alarmed. You were looking for Jesus of Nazareth, who was crucified. He has been raised. He is not here. Look, there is the place they laid him. But go, tell his disciples and Peter that he is going ahead of you to Galilee. There you will see him, just as he told you." So they went out and fled the tomb, for terror and amazement had seized them, and they said nothing to anyone, for they were afraid.
Thanks, Jerry. So it's crazy to think that while not employed as a pastor for this church anymore, here I am taking the Easter Sunday service. Stranger things have happened, but this is up there. Why, you may ask? Well, circumstances for one, as the person who was going to take it became unavailable. But it's more than that. A little while ago, I had what can only be described by me as a knowing moment. Actually, more than a moment. Who do I belong to? Who is my guide, my guru? I asked those questions because I was talking to my neighbour, who is also my friend, about her time in an ashram in India. She went or was drawn to one led by the guru Sai Baba, who quite a famous guy who has since died. He became her guru, her guide, who led her to the divine found in her and all of us, and changed her life. I was thinking of going to India later in the year and wanted to visit an ashram, but which guru to go and listen to? Then I realised I had my own guru to follow, my own light in the darkness, and while he has an incredible amount of baggage with him, he still draws me to him and reveals the Spirit to me in a way that no other does. So these more recent days, I have relaxed about seeking a different path. This is my path, and it seems right and proper that I'm on it. Yet the baggage worries me. So maybe today, let's try to unpack some of this baggage that masks the Jesus I follow. I think a lot of it is related to how we see God, because how we understand and sense God influences how we understand Jesus. The term God is bandied about pretty readily, particularly in church, but what do we really mean when we say the word? I've always had the sense of something more that drives life itself, not a presence that disappears then reappears because of a sacrificial death, but a presence that is found throughout the life of the universe, the life of all creation, and the life of every human being, which is closer to us than our own breath, but urges us to connect with one another with love and care and compassion. A strange attractor, as Barbara Brown Taylor would say. I love that, strange attractor. When we talk about this extra bit of life, this creative force or divine presence, how do we describe it? How does it affect who we are as people? Well, many, including me, would say we see this presence most clearly in Jesus. not only in Jesus, but for us most clearly. Jesus of Nazareth, a man who was flesh and blood, who laughed and cried, prayed and suffered, who was human like us and who died a horrible, painful death. A Jesus who confronted the powerful and paid the price, as many do. Somehow this story lives on in those that follow, a story that resonates in our own lives and the lives of others, even in the 21st century. But it's still good to ask a few more questions. Can we really see God in this person? Is God and Jesus one? The New Testament writers certainly thought so. They write so long after his death, but with such passion and purpose. While we have varying accounts of the resurrection, some physical, like the one we heard today from the Gospel of Mark, and in Matthew, who embellishes it with an earthquake, and Luke, and then some spiritual, like the writings of Paul, which are actually earlier than the Gospels. The reality is the disciples and his followers were transformed by the events. In fact, the truth of the resurrection is not in the details of the differing stories, but what occurred afterwards. And what happened is that God became real to people through Jesus in a way that was different, maybe more earthy, more concrete. Jesus became a living presence, symbolising what life lived in God should be like. His early followers believed that in his words were God's words, and in his action were God's actions. The love and compassion and justice and peace of Jesus were not defeated by the worldly powers of Rome. His vision of a new empire, which he lived out with them long before he died, could not be killed by executioner or a cross. They recognised that the life they had experienced with Jesus was not ended, but had been affirmed by God in their own lives. In other words, his followers continued to experience him after his death, not as a figure of the past, but as someone still walking and talking with them, and it gave them hope. I read lots, as most people know, and lots of who I read are in this space, trying to clear the baggage and get to the core of our faith's message, and asking the same question as you and I, so we're not alone. Let me read something from Brian McLaren, who was a pastor for many years and is an activist, writer, and philosopher. He says, "Do I believe God is a God of domination and might and coercion, or do I believe God is about compassion and love and faithfulness and gentleness?" The disciples believed the latter and had to face the death of Jesus and all their dreams. Maybe they thought themselves fools and idiots for following Jesus. Certainly some of my friends would call me that. Yet in the time after his death, they came to understand that in Jesus and in his life, they saw the light of God, how they thought the God they believed in worked. The disciples experienced Jesus' presence in a way that showed them that this life was not all there was, and that there are things that are worth doing and saying and being that are worth risking everything for. Suddenly they were not afraid of the powers and despots anymore. Pretty powerful stuff. Yet it could still all have stopped there in the first century, remaining as a little subgroup of the Jesus religion. But it didn't. And it's pretty amazing that Jesus is still a central part of many people's lives and the lives of people here today in the 21st century. Sure, it can or could be a ticket to heaven, as some believe, or it could be a whole new way of seeing the world. A transformation, politically and personally, as Marcus Borg would say. I am certainly in the latter camp. The truth that the disciples felt and followed is the truth we all seem to have discovered. So while Jesus was a particular man in a particular time, he birthed a universal message of love that has lived on well past his humanity. The particular became the universal. Jesus became Jesus the Christ, not because Christ is his surname, but because his teachings and actions and God-driven life lives on. Christ means anointed, not magical. Richard Rohr would call it the universal Christ. Matthew Fox, the cosmic Christ. Either way, it's a truth so deep and central to being human, it is awe-inspiring and has a life of its own. The famous 20th century mystic Thomas Merton wrote, "A true encounter with this Christ, with this presence, liberates something in us, a power we did not know we had, a hope, a capacity for life, a resilience, an ability to bounce back when we thought we were completely defeated, a capacity to grow and change, a power of creative transformation." A God power, a spirit power, which in itself is universal. I think we're here today because we can believe, as the early disciples did, that in Jesus the God presence was and is revealed most fully. Somehow the message of Jesus touches and activates something mysterious in all of us, in me, at a heart level as well as a head level. He turns on the light. His words and deeds and the response of his followers show us how to act in faith, to be people of the way. Because this is what God really is all about. And because it's clear to me that what we believe in our hearts and minds really does affect how we act and be in the world. We can become aware of this divine presence within ourselves as it was in Jesus if we let our ego go and our activity-driven lives and look for it hasn't gone somewhere else or only comes now and again. Our response will then reflect Jesus' concern in the everyday, our day. Concern for ourselves, that we can be the best people we can be. Concern for others, that they may be loved and cared for. And concern for the planet and all of creation, that it should be protected and nurtured. At this time, it is what is needed more than ever. And maybe what decisions we make about our money, our time, and the things we value. God transformed Jesus, and God transforms us. So the resurrection story is not about a divine resuscitation of a body or an empty tomb. It's not about a cosmic plan and a future elsewhere. And it's not a once-off event, a miraculous supernatural apparition never to occur again. Resurrection is about the divine presence found within each one of us and in Jesus, giving light where there is darkness, renewal where there is decay, hope where there is despair, and new life where there seems only death. Resurrection happens all the time. It happened with the disciples after Jesus died and they were left to carry on. And it happens in communities and countries. It can even happen for you and me. It's a deeply human experience and a revelation of how the universe and how the God of the universe works in the world. It happens when we keep the story and spirit of Jesus alive. So to finish, I want to share a little story that my friend who is an atheist gave me. I may have shared it a few years ago, but sometimes some things are best heard a number of times. We laughed because in so many ways this story reflects something I hold deeply as being a truth to life, although he thinks I'm slightly deluded. Apparently in the Mayan culture, a sophisticated culture dating back to the 5th and 6th centuries, but present today in South America, their calendar counts backwards to 0. Yes, they counted down, not up. They had and have 2 calendars, a short count, which is roughly 256 years, and a long count, which lasts 63 million years. The most recent end to the short count was in 2012 and caused a great deal of anxiety to everyone who was not Mayan. It's going to be the end of the world. We are finished. There is no tomorrow. What will happen to us when it gets to 0? And do you know what the Mayans did? They just started the count again. Unconcerned it had come to an end, just like that. As though it was the most natural thing in the world to have a reset, to a chance to begin again, a chance to get it right. Now, isn't that what resurrection is all about? new life from darkness and despair, hope that there is a tomorrow that we can be part of, a love that can change things because it never, never gives up. I think so anyway, for what it's worth. Maybe that's what we are celebrating today. Not an empty tomb, but a new way of living. Amen.